Hello and welcome. Well, India is a country that aspires to be an economic superpower. A population of over 1 billion, GDP growth over 6%, a growing middle class, a thriving technology sector and a space program to boot. So why can't it do something as basic as keep the lights on? 370 million people, more than the entire populations of Canada and the United States combined, were left without power in New Delhi and much of northern India on Monday. Power is now returning, but that's scarcely the point. Rajini Vaidyanathan reports now from Delhi on what is, in effect, an economic humiliation.
On the tracks, but not on the move. Millions of commuters were left stranded across northern India after a massive power grid failure lasting 6 hours. The metro in the capital city, Delhi, which normally carries more than 1.8 million passengers daily, was also temporarily shut, which meant lots of waiting around.
My day began with, without water. And then there were other problems. The whole system was at a standstill. That goes on to show how vulnerable we are. One grid failure and the entire country, North India, was on a standstill.
Many businesses were forced to close and India's chaotic roads were even more congested as traffic lights stopped working. More than 300 million people were affected by the power failure, which officials blamed on overloading due to high demand for electricity during the summer months. The vast majority of services have now been restored. This blackout is a symptom of India's chronic energy shortage. Smaller scale power cuts are common across the country. Experts say India's power infrastructure needs to be urgently improved to be able to cope with the demands of a growing economy. Rajini Vaidyanathan, BBC News, Delhi.
Well, Bundeep Rangar is now with me. He advises multinational companies on investment in India. First, what do you think went wrong?
Effectively a power overload, right? So the demand exceeded capacity. India's energy grid is very interlocked. There's 5 different regional networks. They're all linked. So once one goes down, it pulls the other ones down. The result is 370 million people out of electricity for several hours.
So what is wrong with the system?
Okay, that's a very loaded question, right? Because there's not just one thing wrong, there's several things wrong. So first of all, India's always had a shortfall of electricity production. In fact, since 1951, every single target of production for electricity has not been met. So that's a perennial problem there. Secondly, at this particular time, summertime, peak demand because of rising temperatures, a lackluster monsoon rain means less hydroelectricity production. So the compound effect of increased heat, lower production, and basically inadequate infrastructure, because India always falls about 8 to 10% short of its demand. So that's just compounded, and you can look at this as being like a heart attack warning of something bigger.
Yes, and do you think it's a warning that's going to be heeded, and is anything going to be done about it, do you think? Because all the targets they had on rebuilding the energy sector have been missed consistently.
Right, so, and part of the problem here, which is more systemic, is that it's a very state-controlled public sector enterprise, energy, and all the supply chain behind it. So more than half of India's electricity is thermal, i.e. coal produced. The coal supply has been inadequate the last few years, in part because coal mines have not got clearance from, guess where, the Ministry of Environment. So you have this sort of domino effect that's negative from the source to the end consumer, and that's where the problem is endemic. And that's a larger issue to fix, and it's not going to be solved purely by the government itself.
But you're arguing for privatization.
I'm absolutely arguing for privatization. I'm arguing for more efficiency, more transparency, more market-based pricing, and not the state-supported subsidy
But that is
system.
not what politicians in India are going to allow. I mean, they have held back the process of privatization just when we thought it was going to get going a couple of years ago, and now that's all fallen away.
Yeah, well, the thing is, the Prime Minister has made it very clear. He needs $400 billion to get the next 5-year electricity production on target. That's not going to happen unless you give private sector the incentive and private sector the mechanisms for controlling their investment. A public sector system, 50 years is a long enough period to know it's not working. So it's time to fix it before it leads to even a more serious cardiac arrest, because that's just not what the world's second fastest economy needs. And the result, as you can see, electricity alone, the shortage of it shares off about 1 to 1.5% of GDP growth a year. India needs to get that up. It needs to get more efficient, more transparent, and invite more FDI for this.
Bundeep Singh, thank you very much indeed for joining us.
Welcome.